This is Adam Gorney back with the Respect My Decision podcast this week, bringing on Nikki Edwards from CU Sports Report. And a big story this week. Now, the question is it true? That's the important part that we want to get into. I think I saw Dion at lunch talking about how none of it was true and it was all lies and people should be held accountable for lies and those kinds of things. Of course, that's what a coach is going to say if things come to light. But there are some things I do want to get into here. One, it's from Athlon Sports, and the reporter is named Steve Cordair. Apparently, he's not credentialed by Colorado and never has been heard from, which is interesting. Two, at the bottom of the story, it says follow him on Twitter at SM Cordair. And when you go to SM Cordair, it's a woman named Stephanie. It says, don't mess with Texas. She lives in New York City. So there are definitely some questions here, but some allegations of some serious leveling against the Colorado program, locker room violence, fights, gun culture, all that kind of stuff. Cormani McClain being slapped in the face multiple times by Shiloh Sanders. All those kinds of things. What are your thoughts on this? I don't even know where to start. We're not going to break down each one, but your sense of this, the story, and how it's just kind of caught the Colorado beat here.
Yeah, it definitely caught a lot of traction, and these are some serious allegations. And when I initially saw the story, like my first question was the author. I'm like, who is this guy? I've never seen that guy within the local community. Athlon Sports doesn't have a really big presence in the Colorado reporting community. So you see these statements, and there's a lot of hit pieces that circulate around this program, but this one stuck around for some reason due to those allegations. I just have questions of, where's the validity in this? Like, I know there are hurt players from Colorado's program that potentially didn't have a positive experience being under Coach Prime, like the way that their transfer portal works, the way that the roster's turned over, the way that Coach Prime, head coach Deion Sanders, wants to get things done is unconventional, sometimes a little hard, but they have this level of a professional mindset there where, being disposable, it may hurt, but it ultimately what happens in the league, like if you're not performing, then you won't be on the team. So those players are making these allegations, but we talked to Jordan Seaton, who was mentioned in the article getting in a fight with Savion Washington on Monday. He didn't mention Savion's name during the press conference, but he mentioned that this is a brotherhood. He was asked about initiation and hazing, and that just what he said that wasn't what was going on. It was just a brotherhood. They're all getting along. Of course, as I told you, they do get in some scraps during practice. Things get a little bit heated, and fights being encouraged as long as they sort it out amongst themselves. Then just the culture there, of course, is being questioned here in this article. And from outside looking in and reporting on this team every single day, all year round, you have someone coming in trying to discount hold head coach Deion Sanders accountable for things that potentially might not have happened. I just see Cormani McClain, he commented, he was tagged in screenshots of the article on his Instagram, and he commented, "Ayo," laughing face, and then the cap emoji, which means that the things that the Shiloh Cormani fight, the locker room violence, at least from him, not verbatim, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Yes, they do get in fights, and last season was very frustrating on a lot of degrees, but when it comes to physical violence, it's most likely going to be shut down. And it's just a continuation of people trying to really understand Colorado, get their clicks or whatever, their emotion may be. But I just don't, when I read this article, I see the players, they're potentially hurt. I see this author that I've never known, I've never met. He's way outside, and there's just questions there. I mean, a lot of speculations, but is this true? Maybe potentially, some of it when it comes to arguments and whatnot, but this isn't impacting the team whatsoever. Like, the truth here is very flawed, but I just can't fully, as a journalist, I can't fully grasp onto some of these allegations that are being said within this article.
Yeah, and one of the things too that is interesting to me about this article, which was published a few days ago now, is that there's been no follow-up from anyone else. This isn't this sort of coordinated media approach, which I used to cover the Florida Gators under Urban Meyer. I know wild locker rooms, like I know craziness. A lot of that stuff was kind of worked on, by multiple journalists at a time, and wanted to kind of roll it out in that kind of sense. This is like really one of the most interesting stories, though, in college football, though. Colorado, Deion Sanders, what's going on there, how they started last year and how they finished. There's so much to go on. They start 3-0, and everybody thinks, this is one of the best teams in the country. And the easiest bet to win last year was when they went to Oregon, because you just sort of knew that there was some comeuppance coming along. Now, and all of these allegations too. Jordan Seaton has not been in front of the media much. He gets in front of the media this week. Why? Because the story was released and he wants to say something about it. Would he admit that he was in a locker room fight with Savion Washington? I don't know. Maybe not. Would Cormani McClain admit that Shiloh Sanders, knocked them around a little bit? Maybe not. I mean, there's a little bit of a, manhood and ego sort of thing going on there. There's some betting allegations in this story that seem to be pretty wild. There's a lot of gun stuff and players being arrested. Now, this picture of the kid holding up what's claimed to be a Glock 40. I don't know if that's a gun. I can't really tell by that screenshotted picture. It just seems like there's a whole lot here, and it might be a lot of axe grinding going on too. Like when and then I'll let you talk after I have this stream of consciousness.
Yeah,
but
go for
it. When you're on a football team 2 years ago, that is literally hardly competing on a field. I mean, they were so bad. The new coach comes in and basically goes, and was this right or wrong? I don't know. There could have been way better ways for Deion Sanders to handle that than to have 10 cameras on all these poor kids and telling him that he's bringing his own Louis Vuitton luggage from Jackson State, which basically means like 3 or 4 players, not an entire team. He's not going to start dominating college football, although maybe he thought that. It's 3 or 4 players that he brought in at that level that can have competed in the Pac-12 at the time. If I'm sitting in that room and I knew something, or I'm keeping an eye out for anything that goes on in that locker room where I can sort of leak it to someone. Now, am I leaking it to basically unknown reporter Steve Cordair of Athlon Sports? Probably not. So whether this is a family friend, a walk-on that's been in the locker room, somebody that got kicked off the team, I don't know who his sources are here, but it does seem like pretty. I'm not going to say none of it's true. I'm not going to say all of it's true. I have no idea, but I do know that there does seem to be some I'm going to. Deion screwed me. I'm going to try to screw him here.
Yeah, it seems something exactly to that sort of. A lot of players, especially after the 2022 turnover, I know that they were upset with how things were playing out, the way that Deion came in and told them that they were going to compete. But even through that spring practice, he told them, it's like, if you're not reaching this level, then we're going to find someone else to fill your job. He consistently communicated with them that these were the results if you didn't meet up to his standards. And I think that transparency, though, is just something that is not really discussed. Like, he is so maybe like to the players and what he wants out of them. And it's continually these past players or, past people. There were some people that didn't agree with what Deion was doing, but ultimately he's just going to be the leader of this program, and he's going to operate however he wants. I just don't, like, as you said, there's so many allegations in this story, and just the truth of it and the way that it was sourced and the way that this information is trying to be portrayed. It's like in a very, harmful, defacing defacing way. Like when we talk to Coach Prime, it's like, it's good. Like he gives us like the real answers. He's very honest. He's very genuine with us. He just kind of, whatever we ask him, like he'll tell us. Like I asked him about like Texas A&M when kind of the Texas A&M news was happening, speculating on if he was going to go to that school. And he was like, no, like I'm not going to that school. Like we're able to really articulate and ask like hard questions. And these questions were kind of brought up during Monday's pressers with Jordan Seaton, Shane Cokes, Vincent Dancy. I mean, they're going to always uphold the level of brotherhood and keep relaying that message. But it's like, I'm not seeing, at least now, a culture that is going to be the demise of this team, that's going to have any, external problems that may harm a community or people outside the team. Like it's just a lot of like, it's just another hit piece that really caught wind because they are serious allegations, but at the same time, it's just so pinpointed and targeted to where it's like, of course, head coach Deion Sanders, he's going to uphold his word, and he did have his rebuttal. It's like, these are lies, at least from my point of view. There are some things that potentially happened in the past that weren't agreed upon, maybe took a back seat to, but it's just the way that, I mean, as you're talking about Urban Meyer, like there's so many locker rooms around this country that have problems. They have internal problems, that people not getting along, people not understanding each other. And it's Deion Sanders and the story around Colorado. It's like, what's the juice here? What's the tea here that we can really extrapolate on and put him like in a negative light? And just throughout this past, because I've been reporting on Colorado since the beginning of the 2022 season, and that team weren't good. Colorado had no notoriety or relevancy across the country. And then you get Deion Sanders and you get a lot more eyes, you get a lot more speculation. You just get, because people want to know, and people are so interested in him as a figure. So they'll, find a way to get their voice heard, and maybe not the most conducive or, journalistically ethical way. I just, so many questions with this, and there could potentially be some truth, but maybe not to like the violence degree. Like, I don't think those coaches would let anyone get hurt on their watch.
Yeah. And in defense of Deion Sanders, it's like, well, he was hired to come in and do things differently. Like, we don't want the program run the same way. We want it run in the vision that he has. Now, if there's violence and guns and people slapping each other, okay, maybe that part needs to be, publicized and excoriated from the locker room. But like, he's going to run things not like a button down old coach. Like, that's just not how he's going to do it. So he's come in and he seems to have full support of the school and the athletic director and everything. Let's talk less about this story and more about year two. Where do we go from here? Because last year started great. I mean, that win against TCU was like one of the most thrilling, exciting games of the entire season. Little did we know this was not the TCU team that had just played for a national title, but a very dumbed down version of that. They beat Nebraska handily, and then that Colorado State game, the comeback, all that kind of stuff. After that, it was a total S show. Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's because like coaches can prepare for 3, 4 weeks into the season, and then it's really week to week. I don't know if it was a coaching preparation thing. I don't know if there was a ton of depth issues. It seemed like the team stopped basically running the football. Dylan Edwards transfers because of it. They just stopped running the ball. I mean, they were just not trying to run the ball. The offensive line was so bad, or literally broke his back. Dylan Edwards couldn't run the ball. And then Oregon happens. They didn't play poorly, terribly against USC. They scored points, but lost. The only other win for the rest of the season was Arizona State. And that was actually a very poorly played game. Arizona State couldn't walk and chew gum last season. They were terrible. 3-point win. Some good close losses though, like Oregon State by a touchdown. Arizona was a very good team, 3 points. Utah. I mean, I thought that at Utah game was just going to be a complete obliteration. I thought Utah was just going to crush them. That did not happen, which was actually building at least some momentum. The week before, I mean,
Washington
I don't care what
State.
anybody says. The team gave up. They
from the record.
yeah. They
even like that game, Washington State was. I've seen a lot of bad football games on the previous roster, but that game, like, you could just tell how deflated they were. But your statement, but I know like the up and downs of this team, and what I'm seeing now is a lot of answers to the problems and the questions that were happening last year. You have a terrible offensive line. You can't stop the run. You can't run the ball. But you have a quarterback that is allowing you to get into these close games. Yeah. So I think big problems there, of course, offensive line. What we're seeing on the defensive side, so you have Charles Kelly from Alabama. What I learned now is like he was trying to install an Alabama-centric style defense that was coming with terminology and schemes and looks that weren't really conducive to an entirely new roster. I mean, there was a few Alabama guys, but even then, like those concepts weren't being fully grasped. And now they hired Robert Livingston, used to be the safeties coach for the Bengals for the past 12 years. So a lot of experience there. He worked with Lou Anarumo, one of the best football minds in the professional league. What is happening now with Robert Livingston, this is his first ever defense he's ever assembled because, he's only been a safeties coach, first defensive coordinator position, and he's really allowing his guys to play to their strengths. He's constructing a defense around the individual benefits of each player and working around that. I mean, they're going to have their best 11 guys out there, but it's a little bit more simplistic. It's a little bit more slowed down. Like they're all kind of learning together and coming together here. And I talked to Edge's coach, Vincent Dancy, on Monday, and I just asked him, how is it working with Robert Livingston and having him really lead the team? And he's like, I really appreciate what he does. He's really getting everyone on the same page and understanding. And I think a big question with Robert Livingston, you have a secondary guy. What's the front of the defense going to look like? But due to the transfer portal, their defensive front looks a lot more sustainable this year, a lot more Power 5 talent, because what happened last year was more Group 5 guys, transfers in the trenches, and the trenches were so bad. But now they brought in a lot of Power 5 talent, even on the offensive line. You have like Justin Mayers, Phillip Houston, a lot of Jordan Seaton. It's like there is just much more firepower, a lot more experienced talent that was missing last year. So last year was like just going from 2022 to that team. It was, as you described it, TCU, the craziest game. Everyone was just throwing bombs everywhere. I was like, oh my God, this is nuts. And then Nebraska, and then double overtime Colorado State, double overtime at Stanford, sitting in the press conference at 2 a.m. and we're like, what just happened? Like it slowly degraded. And on the offensive side, you got Sean Lewis from Kent State, who runs a fast offense. It's continually told to us they're going to run fast, they're going to play fast, do everything fast. But I think in tandem of that, Shedeur and his wide receivers were usually set, and they're going to have primarily a passing attack. But of course, they couldn't commit to the run, so it developed this one-dimensional offense that couldn't move the ball effectively. You can really anticipate what they're going to do. Defenses are going to pick up on those same slot runs, those one pass options. It's going to be redundant. And Pat Shurmur came in the Arizona game, and then the Arizona game happened. I was like, oh wow. I mean, their offense looks better. I mean, of course they're playing Arizona, which was a very surprising team in the Pac-12 last year. I was not anticipating Jedd Fisch to take his team that far, and good for them. Yeah. But that was a game that, okay, here's a little bit more momentum. There's a change in offensive coordinator. Let's see what Pat Shurmur can do. But, as we've talked to just Pat Shurmur, it was just like he was running how he saw the field, but it was also trying to play within Sean Lewis's system. And there was just a lot of, I wouldn't say friction between the coaches, but just friction and what they wanted to get done on the field. So Pat Shermer, offensive coordinator now. There's a lot of NFL experience across the coaching staff, and it just seems a lot more sound in the trenches this year. Interested to see where this run game goes, because we talked to the running backs coach, and the biggest thing, even during the Utah press conference, like Deion Sanders said, we have two things that we need to work on this season or next season, is committing to the run and stopping the run. And I feel like those are continually just the main priorities on what this team wants to do. Because we know what Shedeur can do. We know the way that he operates. This wide receiver core is going to be really, very good. LeJontay Wester, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn Jr. It's like you have options there. So it looks more improved. I haven't been able to watch practice too much, but Deion Sanders Jr. posts the video. So I look and I see who's on the ones, who's on the twos. And so far during fall camp, defense has been winning.
Yeah, and I think that's what Colorado needs to become, like a little more boring. Like not everything has to be about Shedeur Sanders going number 1 in the draft, which is probably unlikely to happen. Like not everything has to be, Shedeur and Travis are going top 3, no doubt about it. Like probably won't happen. Like there's a lot of good players around college football, like I think it needs to be a discussion about winning up front and, building out that offensive line depth. Now, my final question is this, and a few recruit parents told me this, and it was a very interesting discussion because Deion has gone to the portal so much to kind of change this roster very quickly, and he's done a great job doing it. But can he continue building a roster like that, or does he have to start recruiting high school guys and developing them internally? Now the question becomes, and the rumors are that Deion doesn't want to go out and recruit high school guys. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hand holding. It's a lot of, kissing uncles and making people happy and going to high schools and being on the road. And Deion isn't that kind of guy. So can you be like John Calipari at Kentucky and just turn over your roster over and over and over again with portal guys? Or at some point, do the portal guys, they're there, that's fine, but let's bring in more than 8 high school guys. Let's bring in, let's say 15 high school guys. And how does that work in terms of like development,
Yeah, from that perspective, you see the Georgias, the Alabamas, the blue bloods that have really built a foundation on those teams for a reason due to their development and multi-year. I mean, I see it with Colorado basketball. It's like on the flip side of that, Tad Boyle wants guys that he can grow within his roster. When you look at Deion Sanders, it is like kind of that NFL like trading mentality of where, this guy can come in next and take your job. Like you can go find someone who's played at the collegiate level and go within their system. I think what we ran into last year is just maybe the chemistry there. It's like, well, we've seen Deion Sanders rebuild 2 rosters within 2 years. I think he's proved himself on what he can work with in the transfer portal. When it's like I see like different guys getting recruited. I mean, they had that huge recruiting weekend with I think it was on the 21st of June. Yeah. It was before the dead period, and Julian Lewis was there, Mantrez Walker was there. Like they've gotten like a lot of, when they like identify guys that they want to recruit, like they're going to try their hardest to go out and get them. And, most of the time it's like, you go back to before, just to put everything in perspective, Colorado is not getting 4-star, 5-star guys before. And now Colorado is able to recruit that level of talent, but they're more, I guess, selective in where they want to get those kind of guys. I mean, there are those tough recruiting battles. Like you said, you got to go and hold their hands. You got to talk to them every day. I mean, I've seen, Deion Sanders FaceTiming different recruits, but those are the guys that like he really sees a future in. And you see just a change in the talent level within these freshman groups are coming in. I mean, Dylan Edwards was huge. I mean, it's so unfortunate that he's not with Colorado anymore and they couldn't use him right, because he's going to be so good at Kansas State. It's like guys like that, Jordan Seaton. I mean, all the Cormani stuff too. Speaking of like the craziness of Colorado, it's like at least every year we've seen, Travis back at Jackson State, Kermani, and then Jordan Seaton. It's like 5 stars weren't even in the periphery of Colorado before. So it's, when it comes to like recruiting and bringing in more freshmen, I do agree with that. I think when you can get a guy, especially in this era, like it's hard when you can get a guy for 4 years that can really grow within the program. That's really rare because there's so much more autonomy now that college athletes have, which is great. But at the same time, it's like, it's such a different landscape we're working in now with finances and money and paying these players like so much money to, contribute. And of course, Colorado is going to find, move around those finances. Once Shedeur, Shiloh, and Travis are off the roster, it's like there's a lot of, potential cap space there to invest in players like Julian Lewis and seeing where that can go. But can he do it again? I've seen him do it 2 years in a row, rebuild a roster. So he can keep doing that. But this year too, it's just, the talent is different from last year. So they have an eye for talent and they understand the game of football and they want guys that can, run their assignments, do their jobs, whatever. But I don't know. It's like you just look across and you see, just the Florida States, like these Southern schools and schools that have been prominent, Ohio State, Michigan. It's like they are consistently getting really talented and young recruiting classes. So, it goes both ways. And as we all know, it's like Deion Sanders doesn't operate usually how everyone else does. So you can find great talent in a portal like BJ. I think BJ Green's going to be a great piece this year. So it's just a matter of, because you hear too, just like with coaching instability, with turnover, there are those negative sides of it, of a team that is a little bit disjointed. And now they just have to put it together a little bit better. A lot better than last year. So yeah, it's been very fun and interesting covering this team. So.
Yeah. All right. We will continue covering this team. Nikki Edwards from CU Sports Report. I am Adam Gorney. Stay tuned for the second part of the Respect My Decision podcast with Greg Smith.
Welcome back into the Respect My Decision podcast. I am Greg Smith, National Recruiting Analyst here at Rivals, and I am joined by a special guest, another National Recruiting Analyst here at Rivals, Sam Spiegelman. Sam, thank you so much for joining. How are you, man?
Just excited to be here. Excited to make my debut.
Yeah, you are the first, person on my team to actually join. So congratulations for what that's worth so far.
Oh yeah, bragging rights are in my corner.
Yeah. So you got that. Not that you'd ever brag to anyone. So we'll see here. But I wanted to have you on because there's just been, as usual, a lot going on in the Southeast, right? In particular with a couple of schools that we're going to talk about. And we're going to kick things off with Tennessee, who has been kind of on a roll here on the recruiting trail. It's been really fascinating for me to see this play out. They've got a monster class building. So a two-part question for you. First, are they, with this class and what they've done previously, are they ready to make that leap in the SEC? And then the second half is, do they have the best quarterback room building in the nation?
You know what? They are certainly off and running with the class that they're building. I think that you started to see what Josh Heupel and his staff started with Nico's class. The quality of players that Tennessee was recruiting significantly above what was expected. And we're starting to see that on the field. I think that they have a vision for this program on both sides of the ball. And it begins and ends with the quarterback position, which as we're going to talk about, who recruits quarterbacks better than Josh Heupel? He's on a very select list. Now, this is what most intrigued me about your question for this, because obviously we discussed this a little bit off air, and Tennessee has some great players in this class. Lagonza Hayward just committed. Travis Smith just committed. They're loading up on the defensive line, on the offensive line. They're still in the mix for David Sanders. This class could even be even better in a couple of weeks. But I think the big question is, how well does Heupel recruit? And with Faison Brandon, who obviously is one of the best quarterbacks in the country for 2026, they got a commitment from George McIntyre, one of the best quarterbacks in the current recruiting class, after signing Jake Merklinger and Nico Amaliva. I have 4 schools that I think are in the best, Tennessee being one. along with Texas, Ohio State, and LSU. And I think I don't know if it's, you can make a compelling case, I think, for any one of those teams, maybe Ohio State potentially, maybe having that best room, especially with what's coming with Tavian St. Clair, but Tennessee is in that select group, which is unheard of if you're having this conversation 5 or 6 years ago, Greg.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I'm with you. There are two things that jump out to me about what Tennessee is doing. One is, and you mentioned them both. One is the offensive defensive line loading up that they've been doing. We all know that they're not going to get where they're trying to go or where their fan base wants them to get back to without really being able to attack the lines of scrimmage in playing in the SEC. Like, it's just not going to happen. But on the other hand, if the thing that can kind of even that out as you're building that is what they're doing at the quarterback position. It is tough. I would probably lean a little towards that Ohio State class, but at the same time, their kind of future after Tavian St. Clair, like, they're a little murky because they've missed on a couple of those guys that are in that 26 class. And when I say missed, we're like sitting here August 5th, like very early, but like over a year until those guys actually sign. So they've got plenty of time to figure it out. But just as things currently stand, I do like that Tennessee group. I think that the guys that they both have on campus, I was much higher on Jake Merklinger. I think that I think that he's got a really bright future. I really like what they've got going on. So yeah, I think that Tennessee is well positioned now and into the future. But we'll kind of see how it shakes out as far as them kind of climbing that mountain in the SEC. That's always going to be difficult, but starting where they are on the line of scrimmage and quarterback, I think is the place to start.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and they've completely they've gone not only in the Southeast, they've gone national. They've dipped into Texas. They've gone into different parts of the country. Douglas Utu from Bishop Gorman, obviously trying to dial in on these best offensive tackles, at best offensive linemen, defensive linemen. They understand the importance of the line of scrimmage as well as the quarterback position, which just obviously great roster building. But you seem to write off that LSU quarterback room and that Texas quarterback room pretty quickly.
Probably
should.
Slip. Yeah, that probably should not. We probably shouldn't. In the case of both of those, both of them have some players that are extremely talented. I know that right now there's some Texas fan very much yelling at me for that because that room is obviously loaded. Obviously, currently with Quinn Ewers there, and then you think you're going to pass the baton to Arch Manning, who has like somehow become like this polarizing figure, even though I think he'll be totally fine once he gets his chance to start. And then they keep it rolling going forward after that. No, that Texas room is very good. It's interesting though. We're talking about what 3 SEC programs and then a Big Ten program that always seems to have great quarterbacks and receivers in Ohio State. That'll be interesting to see then kind of how that plays out within that conference, because you're going to see those guys kind of go to battle over time.
Yeah, and probably my fault for not also mentioning Oregon, which has also kind of stockpiled and recently just added to their 2026 class. Not to mention they have a couple of pretty elite quarterbacks sitting and waiting in the wings, and Dante Moore and company.
Yeah, which really, honestly, that's a good call, because that's one that is really intriguing to me going forward, because that whole situation with Dante Moore going to a place where he knew he was going to have to sit and then develop. And then essentially, though, I think it's such a savvy move, because there's going to be skill talent around you at Oregon. Look at the way they've continued to recruit. They also have done a great job along the offensive line, too. And so he's going to walk into a great situation when it's his turn. That's a good pick. I like that pick. But staying down in the SEC, as we were talking about a few with the quarterback situation, I want to shift to Auburn here. So Auburn they've been on a tremendous run as well here. They're flipping players from Alabama. They're landing other big time targets. So my question for you on this is, and I do not mean this with shade, like Auburn people do not come at me here. Is this an NIL thing where Auburn is just like willing to pay more than others? Is this the excitement around Hugh Freeze? Is it a combo? Like, what do you think is leading to this kind of, it's not a resurgence because they always recruit well, but I guess it feels like a step up in Auburn's recruiting.
No, I was thinking about how to answer this, and I was leaning towards saying a combination, and I still think that it is a combination of both. Like much with most programs around the country, to have the NIL base, the amenities to keep pace with the best programs recruiting around the country, but there has to be excitement about the culture of the program. And Hugh Freeze has instilled that culture, which I think the Auburn fan base has been waiting for several years. But I think the catalyst here, Greg, this is the first time that Auburn is not having to recruit against Nick Saban in 17 years. And we're going to touch on Kalen DeBoer, and Kalen DeBoer is in contention. His Alabama class is in contention for the #1 class in the country. And there are dudes in that class, both in-state and nationally. Alabama is still Alabama. But from an Auburn standpoint, they are getting guys in the state of Alabama that in the past might have already been committed to Nick Saban and that staff at this point, or they might have been in a tough battle that might have went Nick Saban's way closer to the signing period. We saw it last year, getting guys like Perry Thompson, Cam Coleman, not only the best guys in Alabama, but guys that Alabama really wanted. And I think that was a little bit of a turning of the guard. And we're seeing it this year. They're getting guys that Alabama wanted, that other schools coveted. Jared Smith is the latest. We saw Malik Autry at the 5-star, Eric Winters, one of these talented hybrid players to build on defense at the 5-star, and Derek Smith, who was obviously committed to Alabama, made the decision to flip after Big Cat. I just think that with Nick Saban out of the picture, they have a really tough choice to make between Alabama and Auburn that maybe wasn't so difficult when Nick Saban was the head coach of the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and it's funny because our this topic and our next one about Kalen DeBoer are linked in a way, right? Because I think you're exactly right. And I've been thinking a lot about this because I've just been paying a lot of attention to kind of Alabama's situation and what they've got going on with Kalen DeBoer, and that I do think that that Auburn's kind of surge here is a lot powered by that in-state recruiting that if you look, I think it's in the top like 8 to 10 guys, none of them are committed from the in-state, or none of them are committed to Alabama right now. And that is, to me, something that you just would have not seen during the Nick Saban era. And I think that we talk about these things as, was Alabama going to have a drop-off? Not really. They're not having a drop-off. But what is happening is Auburn is able to capitalize on that in-state recruiting, because it feels like, at least for right now, players inside the state and a little bit in the region to that point too are really gravitating towards Auburn and Hugh Freeze and what they're kind of building there. I'll be fascinated to see if that continues over the next couple of years, because I don't know. Like, I feel like Auburn is one of those programs that gets a lot of excitement and buzz. And then once we come to turning that into wins or like actually beating Alabama, it becomes really tough, right? So that the on-field portion of it is kind of linked, and it'll be interesting to see. But for right now, like, I really think that it is, again, a combination of both. I do think that NIL cannot be ignored in this conversation. And again, I mean that with respect, because I think that, listen, you're playing within the rules and you're doing what you have to do to win these battles. And we know that all of these high-level recruitments have some sort of NIL component to them. Like, there's not, like, let's not be naive here about what's happening there. So I've been impressed with Hugh Freeze and his staff and their ability to kind of capitalize on the landscape right now. But we'll have to kind of see how things play out over time.
Definitely. This is the rare instance right now where Hugh Freeze and that staff have been at their current school for several years, building the rapport with those kids, and especially in the state of Alabama. They've been to the Plains multiple times, and they just had a huge Big Cat weekend that, they can feel the turning of the tide in the state and nationally from that program. But Kalen DeBoer, to his credit, coming off of obviously what he did accomplish at Washington, recruiting at Alabama at an extremely high clip, where I know we're about to dip into it, but I don't think it's, they're recruiting nationally. They're dipping into Texas and the Midwest and the California. And again, I'm spoiling what's ahead, but in a couple of years, I think that they'll have those same sort of level of relationships recruiting the state of Alabama, just like Nick Saban did not too long ago.
Yeah, and we can go right into that. I think that they're kind of switching it up, though. Is that what it is in your mind about why it is that? Because Kalen DeBoer in Alabama, like you said, they're doing great on the recruiting trail, but it's in spite of all of the talent that they've lost. Both this goes back to the end of last year's recruiting class when he was hired. They lost players. They've then had a lot of high-profile decommits and flips in this current class, but they're still ranked highly. Does it boil down to the fact that they just haven't been there in a while, and guys in that region, recruits in that region, and high school coaches in the region just don't know them as well? Is that what you think is driving this?
No, I think it has to be more of a credit to the schools like Auburn, like, that have stronger relationships, longer relationships maybe, and some guys want to stay in state and be a part of the new wave. But But at the same time, Alabama still has national appeal. They still have appeal locally. I think that this staff is kind of getting their feet wet. What I've seen from coaching staffs as they arrive at new schools is it takes some time to sit there and evaluate your roster, evaluate the incoming seniors, the incoming juniors, the incoming sophomores. You know how it goes, Greg.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, the Kalen DeBoer staff has a bunch of familiar guys from Washington and some guys that he's picked apart from different places across the country, and they're trying to get in sync on their evals. So I think, maybe the wide receiver coach is going after the guys that he recruited here, and then the running backs coach is going after the backs that he really liked when he was there, and they're still evaluating some guys in the class, I imagine. And what the schedule is like, especially for Kalen DeBoer, after leading Washington to the semifinal last year, having the early signing period, having to then turn around, get to Alabama, hit the ground running with the transfer portal, your 2024 class, then hitting the road, get ready for official visits in the summer. I mean, it's a lot thrown at you while also trying to prepare and keep Alabama. So taking a look at some of the guys that they do have committed, wow.
I was going to say, they've got some dudes in that class.
I feel like we're sitting here harping on them, but the biggest flip of the summer, maybe besides Derek Smith from Alabama to Auburn, was Keelan Russell from SMU to Alabama. What a massive get for Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, as we know what they're going to do on the offensive side of the ball, and having, in my opinion, one of the best 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the country to kind of architect that and be the face of this class was huge. Some other guys that really caught my attention on offense, Caleb Cunningham, a guy that, we're very anxious for his senior eval because he is just too athletic to put into words sometimes. Ty Haywood, one of the best offensive tackles, again, a premium position like we spoke about with Tennessee. Michael Carroll fits that bill as well. And one interesting name is Turbo Rogers, one of the more electric backs in the class, one of the in-state guys that they inherited, who they might have to work to keep committed to this class before it's all said and done.
Yeah, but I also, it's funny. I'm glad you started with Russell and Cunningham, though, in this class, because as we do kind of harp on the class, we do have them rated as the second best class in the country, which, again, is a testament to this staff and the relationships they had already built, right? And then I think their ability to quickly sell the vision and then what they had to sell based on what they did at Washington. And that's the reason why I went immediately to the quarterback and the big-time wide receiver, is because to me, and I've said this to you off air, I've said it to others on our staff. Like, to me, I always thought that quarterbacks and wide receivers were going to flock to them as soon as they started to watch what they did previously at Washington, because it is a thing where, they went to the national championship and you knew that they put up numbers, but I don't think that people in the Southeast were really watching Washington like that, right? I think that that's fair to say. And so once you really start to dig into that and you're Caleb Cunningham and you're like, well, wait a second, they just had, a few wide receivers that are drafted, a couple in the first round, it's what they do. And then you look at Keelan Russell and you're like, okay, Michael Penix just got drafted. They always have good quarterbacks. This offense is quarterback centric and friendly. Like, it just made sense to me that eventually this is how that class was going to be built. But like what we were talking about with Tennessee earlier, they've got a couple offensive linemen. You mentioned Ty Haywood, Micah DeBose is in the class. They'll still be in the mix for a couple others. Like this, it's a really, really good class, even after it's losing guys, and they have lost high profile guys. And like you mentioned, the flip of Derek Smith and stuff like that. But they've been able to then replenish those, some cases with upgrades, which has just been insane to see, all before, and this is why it's impressive to me, all before they've coached a game. And I think they're going to win a lot of games down there.
Yeah. And as you say that, the first thing that comes to mind is they're recruiting so well nationally. And when it starts to click in the state of Alabama and in the Southeast, when they get to develop and nurture those relationships just a little bit further, they're going to be recruiting at a very high clip. I mean, Kalen DeBoer put together a all-star staff over there in Tuscaloosa. Some of these guys on defense that caught my eye. I mean, the 2 West Coast DBs, Dijon Lee, Chuck McDonald. Dijon Lee was one of the best corners I saw all offseason, maybe the last 2 off seasons. I think he's in, that elite group with Devin Sanchez and DJ Pickett. Their linebackers. We saw Luke Metz at 5-star. I was wowed by how athletic he is, how big he is. Then a couple of guys from the Midwest, Greg, I know you're familiar with, and Justin Hill and Dawson Merritt. Again, maybe, they want Derek Smith, in that class, and he's a guy from Selma Southside that they would love to keep in state and plug in at safety. But even if they miss on those guys to Auburn, it seems like they have other guys nationally ranked in their pocket that they can go after, which I think is a testament to what they're accomplishing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I really like those Midwest linebackers, kind of hybrid, kind of like edge. I think they call them wolf. I think the wolf is the term that they use, position, as everybody kind of has their own little hybrid safety outside linebacker thing. I think that Merritt and Hill both fit that kind of role. I think that Merritt will take a little bit of time. I actually just recently saw him not that long ago. Super athletic, long and lean kid. Once he gets in that strength and conditioning program, though, I think that he'll take off. And Justin Hill, I think he's continued to be a riser for us out of Ohio. But it's still probably a little bit underrated. And to beat Ohio State out for him, and a guy that Ohio State really wanted to keep home, should really get your attention. And I know that's something that always perks our ears up when you see stuff like that. You're like, okay, they're doing something right.
I couldn't agree more. Having covered the state of Texas for a long time, when you see them go into Dallas and get guys like Ty Haywood out of Denton Ryan and Keelan Russell out of Duncanville, it speaks volumes about the staff. I don't think that, and Caleb Cunningham, who has been leaning every which way at different points of his recruitment. Right. Ton of SEC schools wanted him, including Auburn, to win that recruiting battle. Also be trending in the right direction for Akeelan Deere, one of the best running backs in the Rivals 250. They're recruiting just fine, and I think it's only going to get kicked up a notch as they continue to get their feet wet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely something among many things that we'll be keeping an eye on throughout the season. Sam, I thank you for joining me, man. We'll definitely have to have you back to kind of check in on all things kind of Southeast. As you know, it's always interesting down there. That's going to do it for us. For Greg Smith, that's Sam Spiegelman. We will catch you guys later.